putting American citizens into concentration camps on the basis of race is unforgivable.
Unanimous opinion of the Supreme Court said separate educational facilities are inherently unequal.
And that is the right of Richard and Mildred Loving to go to sleep at night, knowing that the sheriff will not be knocking on their door in the privacy of their bedroom.
A Fortis declared that neither students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate.
In a landmark ruling, the Supreme Court today legalized abortion.
It's our position that everybody in the village of Skokie and everywhere else in the country has First Amendment rights.
I wanted to tell you what marriage meant to me, why we want it and why we need it.
Not even the government can defeat a community so full of life, color, diversity, and most importantly, love.
How do we speak up? Vote! How do we speak up? Vote!
And the only way to protect anyone is to protect everyone.
This bill is unconstitutional and violates the fundamental constitutional rights of women in this country.
How many more children are we willing to subject to a lifetime of pain? It is not temporary, it is forever!
Let today be the last day that you ever doubt black trans power.
Put your fist in the app for George!
People! One nation! One nation! We rise! We rise! I will never stop talking about my abortion!
If you ask, will we fight?
ACLU! ACLU!
Yes, we will fight!
Good morning. Let's all get settled in. Okay. If everyone could take their seats, we're going to get started here. I'll give you a minute. Okay. Good morning. My name is Dipinder Mayal. I'm the Executive Director of the ACLU. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone, for coming today and for everyone joining us virtually. I am proud to be here and to talk to you about all the wonderful work the ACLU is doing and this unique moment in time for us. And we know you're here because you're all passionate about the ACLU. You're passionate about civil rights and civil liberties, and it is a critical time for this work, and it has never been more important. This morning, we're going to hear stories from our ACLU staff and our clients about work that has been years in the making, some of it decades in the making. Now, I'm reminded of a very famous quote. Martin Luther King Jr. reminded us that the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and it is a long road. And since 1952, the ACLU of Minnesota has been fighting for civil rights and civil liberties. In the 1960s, we made sure that people facing jail time for misdemeanor charges who couldn't afford an attorney got one. In the 1970s, we filed the nation's first lawsuit for same-sex marriage. We fought for voting rights for Native Americans. We won the first permit for Twin Cities Pride, and we fought for abortion rights for over 50 years. And this year we have had tremendous victories in Minnesota. What a year. We fought and won for reproductive rights. We fought and won for voting rights, for indigenous rights, for the rights of our unhoused community, for driver's licenses for immigrants, for police accountability, for criminal legal reform, for the legalization of cannabis. We fought it at the State House, at the state and federal courts, at the U.S. Supreme Court, and on the ground alongside communities demanding justice and their rights. Through the decades, the ACLU has fought and built the America that we all know. Now, while we have clocked many victories this year for Minnesota, it is looking darker on the horizon. And I know many of you know this. And not very much like the America that we all know. There is a scarred political landscape. There is a changed view at the United States Supreme Court. There are authoritative trends at play. And it does not look like the America we know when the right to abortion has been stripped from millions of people. It does not look like America when voting rights are under attack like it's the 1950s. It does not look like America when a gay couple or a transgender kid doesn't know if they're going to be refused service when they walk into a store. And it certainly does not look like America when censorship erases basic truths about history and biology in our schools. Through the years, we have fought and we have won, but we have also fought and we have also lost. And remember, the arc of the moral universe is long. And it is because of this community, and I mean this very sincerely, it's because of the people in this room and those of us joining us virtually as well, it's because of you that I can stand here and I can promise that no matter how it manifests, no matter what they throw at us, no matter how dark it gets, that we are going to fight as long as it takes. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us. We have a great program ahead of us. I would now like to introduce our legal director, Terry Nelson. Terry has been with the ACLU Minnesota since 1996. Terry leads the organization's constitutional law litigation program and engages in non-litigation legal advocacy to advance civil liberties in Minnesota. Let's give Terry a warm welcome.
Good morning. My name is Terry Nelson, and I use she, her pronouns. Thank you to Pinder for that warm welcome. In 2015, we filed a lawsuit in Minnesota State Court to challenge the coverage ban on gender-affirming surgery for transgender people on medical assistance and Minnesota Care, which are the state's public insurance programs for low-income residents. The complaint was filed on behalf of plaintiffs Evan Thomas and Outfront Minnesota, the leading LGBTQ+ rights group, arguing that this ban is discriminatory, has no basis in medical science, and is just plain wrong. Evan was on medical assistance and had been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. After struggling all his life, he began hormone therapy and legally changed his name and gender in early 2015. But he was denied coverage for medically necessary surgical care. The result, in this case, the court protected transgender Minnesotans. Let's hear about the impact this has had for Evan.
I'm one of these people who pretty much knew, I won't say from the day I was born, but I've looked at pictures of myself when I was 3, and it's kind of obvious. Here's this little kid with the saw and the little piece of wood just going at it and following Daddy around. And really by the time I was 5, there was no doubt in my mind that I was a boy. I mean, it wasn't even, I'm supposed to be a boy. It was just, I was a boy. And this was in the mid-50s. And there really was not even the language for this at that time. There were no words for this, except I'm a boy and, oh no, you're not. I knew that I needed to do something that would let me live comfortably being the person I was. I was doing it to meet a need of my own that was so enormous. To know that I played a role in expanding healthcare for trans people that's that's life-saving is fantastic. What it really means is that I just go through my life being who I'm supposed to be, and it's not an effort. I'm just me.
So, fast forward almost a decade, while Minnesota continues to protect transgender youth and adults, so far this year, over 400 anti-LGBTQ+ laws have been proposed in 35 states around the country, and these bills overwhelmingly targeted trans youth. While the bills differ, some would criminalize medical care for trans youth, some would ban them from school sports, and others would make it harder for trans people to get correct state IDs. They are not isolated. They are a coordinated campaign to push trans people out of public life and criminalize being transgender. Compared to last year, we've seen an increase in bills restricting access to gender-affirming care for transgender youth. The ACLU has lawsuits in Arkansas, Idaho, Montana, West Virginia, and 2 in Tennessee, challenging laws passed since 2020, and 4 courts have already blocked enforcement of unconstitutional laws attacking trans people. The ACLU has also announced our intent to sue new and proposed healthcare restrictions in Montana, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. Pushing trans people out of public life is only one result of the agenda being pushed in state legislatures. We see increased attacks on voting rights, on access to abortion, on discussing race and acknowledging our history. And these are coordinated attacks on our democracy, our schools, and our health. The activists pushing these laws want us to believe that they are destined to succeed and we are doomed to fail. We choose to believe otherwise and have faith in a future where every child is loved and supported for who they are. The fight for LGBTQ+ rights is far from over. The ACLU of Minnesota is dedicated to fighting for these rights in the text of the law and in practice now and for as long as it takes. Thank you.
This morning, Governor Tim Walz signed a bill into law that will give formerly incarcerated Minnesotans the right to vote. Democrats have been pushing for this legislation for years. The new law will give more than 50,000 Minnesotans previously convicted of a felony immediate voting access across the state.
Today is a good day for democracy.
Surrounded by politicians and supporters, Governor Walz signed the bill into law, immediately restoring voting rights for felons no longer in custody.
People who are prohibited from voting, they have to pay their taxes, they have to obey all the laws, they have to do everything. But they don't have any choice in who represents them. Now they do.
Good morning. My name is Munira Muhammad, and I am the policy associate, and my pronouns are she, her. I work at the state legislative session with local lawmakers and work on ACLU Minnesota's policy agenda and key legislation. This past legislative session was our most successful to date, with numerous victories. We helped pass laws that protected abortion rights, made marijuana legal. Starting on October 1st, immigrants can apply for driver's license, and that's just part of the list. When we were together last year, people on felony probation parole in Minnesota were not able to vote. They could live in our communities, own businesses, pay taxes, send their kids to school, but they could not vote. And I'm happy to say that as of June 1st, Minnesotans on felony probation and parole can register to vote thanks to new legislation. This change did not happen in 1 year. The ACLU of Minnesota has worked to restore the vote to disenfranchised Minnesotans for nearly 2 decades. To put that into perspective, I was in grade school when this began. We have fought for this legislation because we believe that people who live in our communities deserve the right to vote and that people who represent them at every level of government. They deserve the right to have their voices heard at the ballot box, they deserve the right to vote, and they deserve the right to have their foundation of democracy secured. Before legislation was passed to restore the vote, more than 55,000 Minnesotans were disenfranchised while living and working in our communities. There were people who never saw the inside of a prison but had their right to vote taken away for decades. The ACLU of Minnesota worked to end this injustice with a 3-pronged approach. on the streets, in the courts, and at the legislature. The ACLU Minnesota is unique in that we can use an integrated advocacy model because we are both 501c3 and C4 status. Our work to restore voting rights is a perfect example of that model working. In October 2019, the ACLU Minnesota brought a lawsuit against the Minnesota Secretary of State in Ramsey County District Court. Our lead plaintiff was Jennifer Schroeder. Jen was convicted of a nonviolent drug possession charge. She was sentenced to 365 days in county jail and 40 years of probation. Because of a single conviction, she thought she would not be able to vote until she was 71. Unfortunately, on February 15th, the Minnesota Supreme Court ruled that the Constitution does not automatically provide Minnesotans on felony probation with the right to vote upon release from incarceration. But this is exactly why we have an integrated model. Because 6 days later, the Minnesota Senate passed a bill that would restore the vote to over 55,000 Minnesotans. The restoration of voting rights to tens of thousands of Minnesotans is a huge victory, but our work isn't done. There are 55,000 Minnesotans on felony probation and parole who need to know that their rights have been restored. The ACLU Minnesota and our partners are working to inform people throughout the state of this new law and help them register to vote. For many people, this will be the first time they are able to cast a ballot for elected leaders. This is a heavy lift, but we are up to the challenge. I now have the pleasure of welcoming a very special guest to the podium, our lead plaintiff in the lawsuit against the Minnesota Secretary of State, as well as our dear friend, Jennifer Schroeder.
Hi. My name is Jen Schroeder. I use the pronouns she and her. Let's see where it got here. Oh. Sorry. What do we got going on here? Got papers everywhere. Okay. Well. Got it. Where's... Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I'm all mixed up here. I was at this breakfast 4 years ago to share what the ACLU of Minnesota meant to me. When I was here in 2018, my voting rights had been stripped. Until very recently, the state of Minnesota barred people on felony probation and parole from voting. In fact, they barred 55,000 Minnesotans from casting a ballot. People who were released from jail, had finished any prison sentence, and now lived and worked in the community were not allowed to vote. My right to vote was taken from me at the end of a very long battle with addiction. Addiction was a part of my life very early on. Both my parents struggled with addiction after a bad car accident we used together for most of my life. For 25 years, addiction slowly consumed me until it was the only thing I knew. What was left of me was the shell of a person that I once was. My rock bottom came in 2013 when my newborn daughter was taken from me from the hospital. Unfortunately, addiction has no mercy, and it does not stop because you're pregnant. She was born positive for drugs, and 3 weeks later I got pulled over for driving without a license. I was charged with a nonviolent drug offense, and I was sentenced to 365 days in jail and 40 years of probation, with 98 months hanging over my head if I ever violated that probation. When I was released from jail, I went to Wayside Treatment Center, where I began an emotional fight to regain the custody of my daughter. She was 1 year old at the time. Despite exceeding every expectation set for me, I lost that fight. I felt defeated, but I swore to myself on that day that my rights were terminated, that I would never give up and I would prove them all wrong. I never gave up, and I still haven't. I rebuilt my life from nothing. I didn't have a license or a car. I had no credit, never had a checking account. I was in a sober house, far away from anything and anyone that I knew, but I was not going to give up. I enrolled in college, and my first semester I bussed 2 hours each way. I took out student loans and finally was able to pay my fines and get a car. My hard work started to pay off. In 2017, I became the first person in my family to graduate from college with a degree in addiction studies. I became a counselor at Wayside Recovery Center, the same place that my journey had started. But even after I graduated college and had lived and worked in the community, I was still not allowed to vote, all because of a single nonviolent drug offense, now a decade old. I found myself once again about to embark on a long fight, this time to regain my right to vote. Oh boy. Oh. So let's see. I'm sorry, you guys. I continued to persevere with the ACLU of Minnesota and a number of, oh wait, that's not it either. Restoration of voting rights. I'm sorry. To tens of thousands of Minnesotans as we're all mixed up here, you guys. I'm missing a page, I think. Well, I guess I'm winging it. Jeez. You guys, I never flop like this. This is horrible. Oh, man. I know this thing by heart. I could probably just do it anyway. Ay, ay, ay. There's a lot of people in here. So, yeah, I went with the ACLU, and I was the lead plaintiff in a lawsuit against the Secretary of State. When we lost that lawsuit, it was a very familiar feeling. I felt like I was in court again with my daughter. It was really emotional. I was very angry because I thought that the justice system would get it right that time. It was I was angry that they were telling me, it seemed, that who I was and what I was doing wasn't good enough to be a part of society. So I had already been testifying for the Senate and the House and commissioners and press conferences and interviews and all this other stuff. And 6 days later, I was there when the Senate voted to say yes to restore the right to vote. It was pretty exciting. My son Chance, I guess they're gonna, there we go. My son Chance was with me at the Capitol that day, and we explored the rotunda, and it was really fun to get to see that he will get to see me vote. He'll get to experience that. He'll have it in his home, and he'll vote. He'll better vote. Real change, enduring change happens one step at a time. Ruth Bader Ginsburg said that. The restoration of voting rights for tens of thousands of Minnesotans is a huge victory, and it should be celebrated, but there are those who want to try to stop us. A group that keeps trying to restrict the vote over and over again has sued. But the ACLU of Minnesota is fighting that effort, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm going to be a defendant now on this lawsuit. We won the right to vote after 20 years of fighting, and we are going to keep it. We're going to keep the right to vote. I want to close with the same thing that I left you with at this breakfast 4 years ago. I continue to do this work because I believe that the voices of the people struggling the most are the ones who should be heard the loudest. Now 55,000 Minnesotans can use their voices at the polls in this November and every election to come. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Jen, for sharing your story. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Feist. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Chief Programs Officer for the ACLU of Minnesota. My job is to direct and manage the strategy for the organization's legal, legislative, and community outreach programs. For over a decade, we have been fighting for more just police practices. Police are supposed to protect and serve all members of society. Performing this job effectively does not require sacrificing civil liberties, something that happens much too often to BIPOC communities in our state. All Minnesota law enforcement agencies, from the State Patrol to city police forces, need to respect the rights of individuals while enforcing the law. And when allegations of police misconduct arise, there must be policies and mechanisms to hold police accountable for their actions. One way we hold them accountable is through litigation. Less than 2 weeks ago, we had a significant victory in the fight to keep journalists safe when covering protests. In 2020, we sued on behalf of journalists who were assaulted and arrested by MPD and other police while trying to observe the George Floyd and then the Daunte Wright protests. I am happy to report that the judge recently denied the defendant's motion for summary judgment to end the case. In a strongly worded ruling, the judge wrote that the record in this case provides substantial evidence that MPD officers deliberately and systematically targeted journalists, including plaintiffs, who were identifiable as members of the press and not committing any crimes. The judge goes on to say that plaintiffs have provided evidence of a continuing, widespread, persistent pattern of unconstitutional misconduct by MPD, deliberate indifference by city defendants, and evidence of a causal link between MPD's custom and plaintiffs' injuries. Now that we have survived the summary judgment stage, the case is finally headed to trial. We all know justice takes a long time. The ACLU of Minnesota and our pro bono partners have been fighting to keep journalists safe from police attack for more than 3 years now. This ruling is a huge step forward. Public safety and police accountability are intrinsically linked, not mutually exclusive. Minnesotans must feel safe both in their communities and in their interactions with law enforcement. To achieve these goals, the ACLU of Minnesota is focused on increasing police accountability and oversight.
How about put the guns away?
No, we're not.
His hands are up. Y'all, I don't know what is going on here, but there are 3 cops with guns drawn. All hands are up. They just told me to put my phone down and back up.
You can record all you want, but just know you're downrange from guns, so be smart about it.
Just don't shoot! I am at 36th and Halifax Avenue in Robbinsdale. I saw 3 cop cars with officers, guns drawn. I don't know. This officer just told me to back up and get out of the way of gunfire, and I just told him not to shoot. Seems pretty simple. I don't know why they still have their guns drawn on this other person in the car. I don't know what's going on at all.
Passenger, keeping your hands in the air. Step out of the vehicle. Back up towards the sound of my voice. Passenger in the vehicle. Step out of the vehicle.
He's opening the door.
Back up to the sound of my voice.
Well,
Are you guys all good then? Yep, we're good.
well, at least
Hold up, folks.
no one's shooting today. That's good. I'm gonna stop recording now. Thanks, everybody.
The woman shooting that video, Reverend Amy Kortz-Koopman, was charged with obstructing the legal process in 2018, even though she never physically interfered with the police or their actions. The ACLU of Minnesota won dismissal of those charges in June 2019. Then, in August of 2021, we filed a lawsuit against the city of Robbinsdale in U.S. District Court for the infringement of Amy's First and Fourth Amendment rights. We successfully settled that lawsuit in October of 2022. Here to tell you about her story is our former client, and I am proud to say current ACLU of Minnesota board member, Reverend Amy Kortz-Koopman.
Good morning. That video still messes me up. I go all the way back there and into my body, and it's like, ugh. Really was simple. Just don't shoot. Anyway, good morning to you all, friends, allies, and partners in justice. My name is Amy Kortz-Koopman. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am honored to be here with you today, not only as a former client of the ACLU, but also as the first board member who was a former client. Thank you. And I am happy to share with you a bit about why the work we're doing is so important to people like me and communities like mine in North Minneapolis. But first, a little bit about that video you just saw. In August of 2018, I was driving home from work and I encountered those three officers with their guns drawn and pointed at a stopped car with two black men, one of whom was shirtless in the street with his hands raised, and my heart pounded as Philando Castile in particular flashed through my mind. So I pulled over, parked, and crossed the street to film them. I wanted to bear witness and make sure that if things went downhill, there would be a time-stamped live recording of it. So I opened Facebook, I began live streaming, and when an officer warned me while filming that I was downrange from a gun and that I ought to be careful, I stood firm, and I even felt emboldened to respond, which I was able to do because I am a white woman whose privilege protects her. But it didn't protect me from everything. Afterward, two of those officers that you kind of saw walking toward me at the end threatened me with arrest and charged me with obstruction of a legal process for interference with a peace officer. Friends, I was so shocked, anxious, and shaky that it took me 30 minutes to get home 2 miles away from where we just were. And that was just the beginning. Over the 4 years that followed, I worked closely with ACLU Legal Director Terry Nelson, Staff Attorney David McKinney, and 3 pro bono partner lawyers to not only win the dismissal of the criminal charges, but then to sue the city of Robbinsdale and the Robbinsdale Police Department for violating my First and Fourth Amendment rights. And I won the largest cash settlement to date of its kind in Minnesota, $70,000. And more importantly, a series of 7 policy changes that directly impact how police interact with the public and our ability to hold them accountable when they fail to respect our constitutional rights. Yes. It was a big win. So big for me personally that it lit a different kind of fire in my heart to work more closely with the ACLU on a longer-term basis as one of the newest board members. And as I was in seminary, just at the beginning of this, I started seminary, and I was in seminary through this entire process, and it bolstered my passion for everyone, especially my clergy colleagues, to know their rights, to make sure that other people know their rights, and it entrenched my conviction that the work we are doing for justice and liberation is, in my own faith language, sacred and holy. I cannot be a pastor without a commitment to tangible justice for my neighbors right here and now. And yet, as we were fighting for much of that time, Donald Trump was president and presided over 4 years of direct constitutional attacks on our most vulnerable neighbors. He did his best to erase constitutional protections for reproductive rights, LGBTQIA2+ rights, religious liberties, and so much more. Closer to home, Over the past 5 years, Minnesota police have killed 64 people, including George Floyd. And despite robust public demands to divert just some of the millions and millions and millions of dollars in funding for police to public services that are proven to reduce crime and increase safety, security, and solidarity among citizens, police budgets have actually expanded, not just in Minnesota, but across the country in many of the largest and most violent police departments in the U.S. And on the other hand, just this summer we achieved monumental protections in our state legislature that we have been working on for up to 2 decades in some cases. We enshrined the right to abortion and access to birth control into state law. We ended the 24-hour waiting period for abortion and the requirement for doctors to lie about the procedure to patients. We legalized recreational marijuana, we gave immigrants the right to get a driver's license, and we restored the vote to 55,000 Minnesotans in our communities on felony probation and parole. It is huge, friends, the work that we have been doing, and none of it would have been possible without the relentless efforts of the ACLU of Minnesota, its allies, its members, and its donors like you, whose big and small dollar donations give life and breath to the hope of liberation that we are desperately wanting and needing, and all of us deserving. And I literally would not be here today if it had not been for the ACLU of Minnesota donors. All of this is happening at once, which I say to remind us again that the road to justice is long. It is neither quick nor linear, but it is winding, and it takes us over high mountains and into deep valleys. And so it requires us, in the words of Angela Davis, to act as if it were possible to radically transform the world and to do it all the time. Because none of us are free until every last one of us is free. Friends, some of us are lawyers, some of us are pastors and religious leaders, and some of us are neighbors with checkbooks and a heart to see the possible made real. But it takes every single one of us, every single one of us, every single day, for as long as we breathe. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Larissa Maldonado. I'm chair of the board of the ACLU of Minnesota. If I haven't met you, if I haven't had the chance to connect with you, I've been on the board since 2016. I'm the first Latina and first woman of color to serve in this position. Thank you. I want to mention, Amy joined our board this year, which she has brought such an incredible contribution as a former client, and bringing that perspective to our organization has been monumental in driving our mission. And a lot of people think that you have to be in some kind of club or be a lawyer or have some specific background to join our board. But I just want to, dispel that myth. There is no, secret boys club. There's no old girls club. There's nothing like that. If you are interested in joining our board, you're committed to the cause, and you're interested in being in leadership of the organization, I'd invite you to visit our board's page on the website, where we have information on how to join committees, how to apply for the board. And I want to just stress to you that we are really looking for all kinds of voices, all different voices on our board and in leadership of the organization to drive our mission going forward. Now, first, I want to give a disclaimer that all the views I share are my own, but I also need to sincerely thank my day job at Wells Fargo for allowing me to be here and serve this organization. And I also need to thank my family. Thank you, Roger, for being here. Last year, when I spoke with you, I told you about a deeply personal situation I had just experienced. I had boarded a flight to Georgia on a work trip, and I was pregnant. When I landed in Georgia, I began to experience the signs of a miscarriage. My first thought was to go to the hospital, but then this was in post-Roe America. This was right after the U.S. Supreme Court had overturned Roe versus Wade, and I knew that there would be severe limitations on the reproductive health care available to me in Georgia. And because my pregnancy was past 6 weeks, physicians would have to weigh the personal and professional liability involved before advising me on the best course of care. They couldn't legally provide health care needed for a miscarriage unless I was in mortal danger. So instead of going to the hospital, I went to the airport. When I landed back in Minnesota, I went straight to the doctor. And in the midst of the loss and pain and stress, I couldn't help but be thankful that I was home in Minnesota where I could have a range of options, of choices for my care. And now I'm even more thankful as Minnesota has taken a leading role in ensuring abortion rights are protected. Then ACLU has been there at every step of the way. This past legislative session, the legislature passed the PRO Act and Governor Walz signed it into law on January 31st. The PRO Act codifies the fundamental right of Minnesotans, not politicians, to make individual decisions about reproductive health care, including contraception, abortion, and pregnancy. It ensures that Minnesota can remain an island of access for reproductive freedom among states around us restricting abortion. In the fight to protect reproductive freedoms and all of our precious civil liberties, the ACLU of Minnesota is uniquely positioned to engage on all fronts. We fight in the courts, bringing critical impact litigation to protect individuals whose rights have been violated, including incarcerated people who need abortion care. We fight on the streets, empowering and engaging people in the community, amplifying voices, and educating voters on civil liberties issues at stake at every election. And we fight in the Capitol, where we are ever present to protect civil liberties in the room where it happens. I can promise you that we are going to keep fighting for as long as it takes. The ACLU in Minnesota is for the people, and we are just getting started. I want to introduce one of the newest members of our staff, Haley Bailey. Haley Bailey is our Chief Advancement Officer with over 15 years of experience in international and national nonprofit work, and she is responsible for leading our fundraising and outreach efforts.
Oh, thank you for that introduction, Larissa. As Larissa noted, I am Haley Bailey. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Chief Advancement Officer for the ACLU. A dear friend of mine reminded me that last year I was seated where you all were, listening to this wonderful program with a pretty cool keynote speaker, and I just left feeling like I want to work for the ACLU. And this year, here I am. Honored to be a member of this team and thrilled to be part of the work that we're doing every single day. Friends, it is that time to get to the business of making sure that ACLU Minnesota is protecting civil liberties
and civil rights for many, many years to come. Table hosts, I would like you to grab those yellow envelopes that you have. Right now, friends, your table host should be handing you envelopes that tell you all the ways that you can support the work that you heard about today. We are asking that you make a meaningful gift to the ACLU of Minnesota. Friends joining us virtually, on the lower third of your screen are two options for you to participate today, going to our website or using the text to give option. I'm excited to inform you that gifts made today, both in this room and online, will be matched up to $50,000. That means your $5,000 gift becomes a $10,000 gift, your $500 gift becomes a $1,000 gift. But in addition to a gift today, I am asking that you commit to supporting us through all of ACLU Minnesota's tomorrows. You can do that through giving us a multi-year pledge of support that can be paid annually or through a reoccurring monthly gift.
Now, you've heard this morning how long the arc of moral justice is, and how civil liberties and rights that we have fought for 2 decades, we're still fighting for. How our rights and civil liberties are being eroded in the highest court in the land, and how we can enact change in Minnesota and offer protection for those rights.
Multi-year support gives us the room to be strategic and nimble. Monthly donations ensure that we have guaranteed income every month to do this critical work. Your generosity today and your promises for tomorrow means that we will never stop fighting. We will never stop fighting for all Minnesotans, fighting for everyone in America regardless of immigration status, fighting for as long as it takes.
And thank you all for being here. I can't believe we're already back here. I can't believe it's been an entire year since our last breakfast, but seeing this room at the Alumni Center full of so many supporters of justice and so many community members is truly inspiring. And thank you to everyone who's joining us in TV land. Thank you to the champion and defender sponsors that helped make today possible. Dorsey and Whitney, Vance Opperman, former board chair, Ballard Spar, Bond and Devick, Faegre Drinker, Frederickson and Byron, Jean Link and Anne-Marie Hirsch, Jim and Andrea Rubenstein, Joe Green and Trudy Anderson. Joe's also a former board member and former chair of our foundation. John and Joanne Gordon, Kathy and John Junick, Maslin LLP, Nicole Moen, former board chair, and Mike Skoglund, Stinson LLP, and Thomson Reuters.
As you're all completing your donation and pledge cards, I would love to have our table hosts stand and be recognized for all the work that you do to make today possible. No? Come on, guys. And to our wonderful staff and board members, please wave from wherever you are in the room. Thank you for being a part of this team. It is truly a group effort for everything that we do. And as you finalize those donation and pledge cards, please be sure to give them back to your table host. And then I get to the fun part. I want to invite all of you to mark your calendars for Tuesday, October 8th, 2024, same time, same place. We are inviting you to come back and hear about what all of your gifts today help us do in the next 12 months, and what all of your gifts for tomorrow help us plan to achieve in the coming years. Thank you for your time, and thank you for giving us your morning.
I also want to say, if you are not a table host this year, please consider being a table host next year. You don't have to make any specific financial commitment to be a table host. Just let our philanthropy department know. Invite a few friends. Bring in your community. We appreciate all of you being here. Thank you.